As we discussed today, here's the form of our piece. We have the original, which is repeated several times. Then we have a shorter excerpt, which is then repeated several times. Now we have the excerpt, which is going out of phase. So we have one that's just a little bit longer than the other. And you can see that they get farther and farther apart, and that goes on for a while. Then we add more parts. So in this case, we have 4 that does the same thing. And then lastly, we just fade out. Okay, so we're going to do our Steve Reich Come Out project. So here I have an excerpt. Let's listen to it.
No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there.
So if we follow the format, first thing we need to do is just repeat this a few times as is. So very easy to do. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger by just clicking and dragging there. One other thing I want to do before I get to that, I don't need to deal with bars and beats, whatever, so I'm going to change my display here to just time. So that's all I need right now. And I'm going to be using this snap on and off from time to time. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to be using what it helps. So you can either click the button here, or if I click here, it shows me that the keyboard equivalent is Command G. So I'm going to be using that because it's a lot easier. So let's turn the snap on. Right, I have it set to Smart Snap. So let's click this, and the easiest way to copy, if I hold down the Option key on the keyboard and I drag, you see that my cursor changes to a plus. So I'm going to bring it over here, and while my finger is still on the Option key, I'm going to do that. So now let's play the end of this.
Don't want to die to get there. No one wants to die.
So on and so forth. Let's do that a couple more times. Remember to keep your finger down on the Option key until you let go of the mouse. Otherwise it'll move it, it won't copy it. So now I have 4 copies. So now the next thing that Reich did was take a piece of it. So let's find a good piece here.
Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there.
Let's see the beginning.
No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't
Let's see.
want to go to heaven.
Let's try Go to Heaven. Let's see. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I think it's right about...
Go to heaven.
There it is, Go to Heaven. So I'm going to make one more copy, and I'm going to just take that part. So let's make one more copy, holding down the Option key, dragging over. Let's zoom in a little bit and see if we can find that Go to Heaven one more time.
Go to heaven.
There it is. So now I'm just going to trim. And let's trim this part. Let's see what we have.
Go to heaven.
Let's see. Want a little bit of that there.
Go to heaven.
There we go. Good. Now let's move that back over here.
Die to get there. Go to heaven.
Now, I want to repeat that several times. Easy to do. Since we have looping in Logic, I can just move my cursor up to right there in the middle. So here, notice it changes. And then down here, change that. So in the middle, it's looped. So let's just loop a few times. And here's where the snap comes in handy. It snaps right to the end of the loop. So here's
Go to heaven, 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 go to heaven.
So I'm not going to do as many as Steve Reich did, but we'll just do a few. Let's do a few more. Also, one thing that kind of bothers me, if you notice here, this is not time. This is measures. I want to make this into time. So I'm going to show you where you can change that. Let's make this at the end of a loop. There we go. So if I go into Preferences, or the File menu, I should say, and I go into Project Settings, General. And here's where if I click on General, if it's not selected, I uncheck Use Musical Grid. And notice now I have time in my bar here. There's actually a way to see both, but I don't really care about that. So let's make sure we're at the end of a loop. There we are. Okay.
Heaven, go to heaven, go to heaven.
All right, so there we have our repeat, our excerpt. Now, what needs to happen is that we're going to have one go a little bit out of phase. So I want to do a little bit of this one the way it is. It's playing out of both channels.
Go to heaven, go to heaven.
Okay, so it's playing out of both channels. Now I want to make this one change to pan all the way hard left, and I'm going to create another one to pan all the way hard right for a little bit. So let me zoom out. And if I want to make a copy of this, remember this is the loop part. Here's the actual sound file where it's a brighter white. So I'm going to hold down my Option key and drag right to the end of this, and it should snap right to the end of it.
Heaven, go to heaven, go to heaven, go to heaven, go to.
That sounds pretty smooth. Now I need to create another track. At this point, this one's going to pan all the way left, and I'm going to create another one that's panned all the way right. So I'm going to duplicate this track, so I can just click on this guy here. Or I could have just added another audio track. Now, I want to copy this one all the way down here. So again, I can hold the Option key, drag it down here, and we should hear exactly the same thing.
Go to heaven, 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 go to heaven.
A little bit louder, but we're going to pan now. So easy enough to do in this one. Since it hasn't started yet, I can just take this track and set the panning all the way right. This one was stereo, so I need to change its panning from in the center to all the way left. So again,
heaven, go to heaven, go to heaven, go to heaven, go to heaven. Go.
So the right channel is, this audio 2 is panned all the way right. So the way I pan this one or change the panning is, let's zoom out a little bit, and I want to open up automation. That's right over here. Or I can use the letter A. Now I have open automation. And you notice it says volume on this track. I need to change it to panning. So if I click on this and I go to main, here's pan, set it to absolute. And now I see this yellow line. So I'm going to click on right there. I'm going to create a little node right at the very end. This is why I want to zoom in, because it needs to go right before he starts talking. So I'm going to click right here, then click right next to it, and drag all the way up to the left. So now what's going to happen is it should sound exactly the same, because we go from a stereo file to one that's panned all the way left and one that's panned all the way right. So let's see what happens.
Go to heaven, go to heaven, go to heaven, go to heaven, go to heaven.
So it sounds pretty much the same. Good. Let's turn off automation for now. The next step is to make this one that's panned all the way right go out of phase a little bit. First thing I want to do, so I can keep track of my tracks, let's turn on assign track color. Let's turn on our track colors. I'm going to make this one a little bit different. So let's take our blue and we'll go one to the left. So it's slightly different. There we are. And then just so it's nice, let's color the track by the region color. There we are. So this one is going to go out of phase a little bit right after this repetition. So I can just keep looping this one till the end, so I'm just going to leave that one alone. But I want to copy this one, and notice now they have different numbers every time I do that. So I'm going to hold down my Option key and click over here in the bright white area and drag over here so that it bumps up right there. There we go. And now this one's going to go a little bit out of phase. So let me show you a good way to do that. Because I could drag. There's a couple different ways. If I move my cursor down to the bottom and I hold down the Option key, notice that changes, and I can drag a little bit and it'll make it go out of phase. But I only want it to go out of phase a little bit. So one way to tell how much I can do it, if I open up this area right here where it says List Editors, and I click on this, it tells me the length of this particular audio excerpt. And you can see it ends in 6.42. The one up here is in 6.10. I don't want it to go, so that's 22 1,000ths of a second. I want it to go maybe 10 1,000th of a second. So when I click on this one, I can actually change it, change the number. If I double click on the 642, and then I can drag my cursor. I want to go to maybe 620. I'm just dragging, I just clicked and dragged the cursor down. So you could see this move while it did that. And now I can close this part. So now it's just a little bit longer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click over here and loop this one. And you notice if I go to the end of the loop, and let's go to the end of the loop here, it's going to be a little bit off. It's a little bit longer. So let's hear what that sounds like.
Heaven, go to 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 heaven.
So it's a little bit off. So that's exactly what I wanted to do. So now the next step, let's make this go a little bit longer. So we're going to loop this, I don't know, over to here or so. And we'll take this one and we'll loop it a little bit further. Okay. So it sounds I think it sounds kind of cool. So the next step would be to add more tracks. So we can do the same thing. I'm going to take this one, create a new track, and stretch it a little bit. And then I'll create a fourth track, create a new one, and stretch it a little bit. And we'll see what happens after I've done all that. So I've created a couple more tracks. I have this one here on audio 3, and you can see that it is 630 thousandths, and this one here is 640. And you can see where their loops are, that they don't coincide at all. And let me just play a little bit of it. I'll just play right at the end.
Go to heaven, 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 go to heaven.
So the next step is to do a nice slow fade out. So I might, right now I'm right at 2 minutes. Let's add about another 30 seconds. So here's 2 minutes and 30 seconds right there. So all I have to do is extend the loops out to about 30 seconds, 230. All right, I want to fade out for about the last 30 seconds. So one way I can do a master fade out, I need to fade the stereo out, so I want to automate the fade out. So under my track menu, I want to say show output track. And now the stereo out has a track here, so it makes it easy to draw in a fade out. So I'm going to turn on automation, clicking there. And you can see this one has display off. I'm going to turn it on volume. And right about 2 minutes, which is right there, I'm going to create a dot. And right at my end, I'll create another one. And I'm going to drag down to 0. So we'll do a 30-second fade out. And you can see the slider here on the stereo out fading out. I don't have to do the whole thing. The last thing I want to do is I want it to end right when it ends. I want it to stop counting, because if I play it from the very end, watch what happens. It just keeps going, which I don't need to do. So if I keep scrolling all the way to the left, eventually I'll come up to where it puts the end of the file, and there's a little triangle right there. And if you move your cursor up, it'll highlight that end marker. So what I want to do is drag that to the end of my piece. So now, and it stops. It's just a nice thing to do. I'm going to turn off automation. Let me zoom out a little bit so we can see the whole piece. So there's the whole piece. Now it's your turn to do it in the next class.